Welcome to our podcast, proudly brought to you by VPA Australia, our trusted supplement provider since Unity Gym started. As sponsored athletes, we're excited to offer you a special 10% discount on top quality supplements that ship worldwide. Just use our discount code from the description. To avoid international shipping fees, contact VPA and tell them we sent you to get a flat shipping rate. Today's episode is also sponsored by the Flexibility Blueprint. Ever felt lost in the sea of social media fitness advice? The Flexibility Blueprint is your map to progress, designed to help you get laser focused on what matters most for your journey in flexibility and strength. And guess what? It's free. Grab it using the link in the description. If you're starting your flexibility journey, don't miss our 20-minute mobility routine. It's your first step to quick wins in flexibility. For those further along, use our Flexibility Masterclass, featuring advanced techniques like loaded stretching and end range strength for the pancake, front splits, middle splits, and more. Links for both are also in the description. And for the seasoned athletes, avoid the frustration of complex training puzzles with our UMS Tribe membership. It's a different online coaching experience with strength and flexibility combined. Don't forget, we're Amazon affiliates too. You can find all the equipment used in our videos and podcasts at the most competitive prices with our affiliate links in the description. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today on the podcast, we're going to tackle the question of how to incorporate sports training with your gym training, or how to get strong, flexible, and fit all at the same time. And we're also going to tackle what role age plays in the process. Is that all right?
We don't do it. We don't get the
I thought
fancy
you were
overlay
going
anymore,
to
mate.
roll.
This is like going back in the day. This is like being
I
back
thought
in
you
the
were going to
studio.
roll the bumper.
We haven't done a bumper in
All
years, mate.
right. How are you going, Phil? Of course, I've got Phil White, our resident physiotherapist here to rock the show. And Rad's not joining us today, but he is in the background just telling me when I make mistakes, like just now. And so, yeah, how are you going, Phil, first of all?
Yeah, good. And definitely a topic that I love to talk about, because I think this is just one of the big challenges of finding kind of an approach to exercise that you love, because obviously it's like a lot more fun to just play games and play sport, but then preparing your body for it and trying to perform well and be able to turn up day after day, particularly when you're getting older, is hard work. So sort of balancing that ability to physically prepare and get all the sort of strength and flexibility and fitness goals, while also incorporating fun and enjoyment and social activity with sport, I think is such a interesting challenge, and definitely something that I got so wrong for so many years.
Oh man, I tell you what, there's nothing that will derail like your athletic prowess than physique goals at the gym. You know, if you play a sport, for me it was boxing, and I got to a point in my life where I became a lot more vain and cared a lot about how I looked with my shirt off, and so I was going to the gym and training like a bodybuilder, and that was diabolically counterproductive to being fast and agile and powerful and explosive and turning up to train at my boxing gym. And I did that boxing every day, for 2 to 3 hours every day. And so it became a real problem. And probably for a couple of years, I tried to juggle those two, wanting to put on muscle mass and be a bodybuilder. Like, no, I never wanted to stand on stage in my underwear and pose, but I didn't want it to be to that level, but I definitely wanted to change my physique. And it really, really had a negative impact on how I could box. If I trained, like, bodybuilding is kind of in its own category, because you are just trying to cause so much metabolic damage to the tissue that it's very hard to do anything else around those training sessions if you're doing it properly. If you're doing a proper muscle hypertrophy training program or workout and you're successful, then you limp out of the gym on leg day. And if you were asked to do a push-up after chest day, the day after, you just fail miserably, and so it was really, really tough. And then eventually it led to injuries, and it was one of the demises of me in the end, because I really, really overcooked a tricep tendon, and then when I threw a punch at boxing, it tore, and it was a problem for quite a long time. So it's definitely something that needs to be taken into consideration. And for the audience out there who are in their teens or early to mid 20s, you might be sitting there going, oh, whatever, and I tell you right now, age plays a major role in this, because there was a period of time where I felt like I could get away with anything. And that was when I was sort of 18, 19, 20, right through to probably mid 20s, 24, 25. You could operate with almost no sleep after kicking on the weekend at the pubs and clubs. You could train to absolute neuromuscular failure 5 days a week, and then turn up to your footy game on the weekend and still perform like a, sprint like a gazelle. But then I hit a point in my probably early 30s, mid 30s, where there was just no way I could do that. And we had lots of members coming into Unity Gym who played rugby on the weekends and wanted to keep up with all the young bucks in the gym program. And our gym program was very much about just developing as much strength, flexibility, and fitness as possible. And then you could sort of deploy that into a sport, but you certainly needed to be careful how you blurred the lines with when you were in peak season. You couldn't do the 5-day-a-week program. It would just destroy you for the weekend. We had a lot of guys really struggling with that. And you would have witnessed a bit of that, when you were working in the gym. We had to start really figuring out when it was best to do leg day, because if you did leg day within 3 days of competition on the weekends, you'd be a mess. Not only were you more susceptible to injury, your performance was just like, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's a struggle. And with, I guess, the way that the UMS is set up, like there's, certain days like have really particular themes, and it's always, deadlifts on a Friday, which if you're going to go intensely into a sport on the weekend, then, going for a big deadlift session the day before is certainly not going to be ideal preparation, and certainly not, the sport isn't going to be ideal recovery to get results from your deadlift. So it's such a neat system that you guys have developed, but then it's like, okay, what happens when we need to get in some other considerations there? And so, yeah, this is coming off the back of a question from one of the UMS members, and he has asked specifically about the kind of being in that 30 to 35 age group when age has started to play a role in recovery, and then talking particularly about like having is it ideal to, or what do you do about having a lower body day less than 48 hours before the next game? So, and he's saying potentially unless it's like 10 minutes long where DOMS doesn't occur. So yeah, I think it's a really useful question, because again, we want to sort of, it's so tempting to just like follow the program to the letter, but then if you're getting heaps of interference or risk of injury from participating in sport, then that perfect program is no longer perfect for you. So, but the beauty of the UMS is that it's so adaptable, and it gives you such a strong foundation to just tweak to your needs. But yeah, on the age thing, like I mean, I was played representative sport from 14 to 26, and I mean from even 14, 15, 16, like getting this wrong really played a toll, and I was so injured. And then the biggest predictor of future injury is previous injury. So once you start that cycle, you can just really get yourself in a downward spiral. And I found this body chart from when I went to the physio when I was about 26, I think, where I'd kind of done an X on all the bits where I was injured, and it was like this kind of faint outline of a body somewhere, and then there's just like big old red X's everywhere. Because I just got this so wrong, because before I met you guys, like I would just like, I loved sport. Sport was life. I played representative ultimate frisbee, which if you haven't heard of it, it is actually a sport, and it's not played with dogs. It's kind of like American football, but no tackling. And so it's like lots of sprinting, jumping, changing direction, all of that. And the strength and conditioning, inverted commas, for that was basically like run as many 5Ks as fast as you can per week, do as many training sessions and as many games as you could per week. And like that was me for years, and it just led to such a downward spiral of horrible injuries, and then also just not like maximizing potential there. So I think like, although it is certainly a thing for once you pass 30, like if you are younger, get this stuff right, you'll get better results, and you'll much less likely to get injured. So that's a bit of my background on it.
I laughed a little bit there because I had quite a funny, parents might relate to this, but I had a funny moment only a couple of weeks ago where my son was going in to have a tooth removed at the dentist, and he's only young, he's only 6 years old. So I sit at the end of the dentist chair and hold his hands the whole time. And I did it the day after doing a really heavy deadlift session. And it required me to sit on a stool bending forward, sort of like in a half deadlift position for about an hour, and it was just the most brutally painful thing. And the dentist looked at me at the end of it all and said, I think that traumatized you more, because I was just dripping with sweat and probably the color of a beetroot. And she's and I said, no, it's not that. It's my lower back has been in spasm for the last 45 minutes, and I've just had to like let it go because my poor
Yeah.
kid needed me. And so yeah, that's just an example of like choosing to manage load appropriately to what you've got on your plate, and that was a good example of mismanaging load. You know, doing a big deadlift session right before having to go and do that
Yeah,
was a
but
silly thing to do.
there's the nice, like, planned things, like, if you registered for a sport and you know it's gonna be a certain time, and then there's definitely those unexpected ones, like, I've started to get into doing bicep curls for the first time in my life because I've started to realize just how hard carrying a, 1.5-year-old, like, 16-month-year-old for long periods of time, my biceps are just absolutely, like, burning with fatigue. But
Yeah.
now I'm like, "Okay, how do I train it so I can get in the gym and strength them up?" But then I've got to do it on days where she's not at like, she is at daycare, so then I can recover by the weekend. Like, it's just this whole
But it's one of
yeah,
those things
it's
with holding your children because biceps are such a fast foot muscle that you know they're not a
yeah,
very good endurance muscle in any case. So to
yeah,
train them for that,
and
it's so
having
difficult.
a it's like carrying a dumbbell that's wiggling around and, trying to
Exactly. Yeah.
waving at every bush turkey that goes past.
Yeah.
Anyway, so to so to
Parent
kinda yeah, I
parent
think the way to
challenges.
yeah, but I think the way to think about this is, like, it's that classic problem of you can't optimize everything all at once. And I think one of the most important like things to start with is just like what are your goals? Like is it to are you playing sport and playing competitively? Like are you in a high level? Are you playing professionally? Obviously that will be like that will have to be the number one priority. But if you're in a team with your mates and you really, it means a lot for you to get to the top end and you need to perform your best every week, then that's going to nudge you towards okay, let's like optimize for being fresh and recovered and in peak performance on the weekends. Whereas if your sport's just, a bit of fun that you do on the weekend, you have heaps of substitutes, you can just kind of take it easy if you need to, and you really got some big goals around increasing your strength or increasing your flexibility or increasing your fitness, then I think that's the most important place to start because it really does change, yeah, where you're going to take your approach because yeah with the body it's all about specificity and you do really need to decide on okay what's important because if you try and go all of them all at once particularly when you're past 30 yeah that it's going to run into trouble.
Yeah, I've come to realize. So if I quickly go back and just give some context, the way I managed it when I was boxing competitively was that I went and, brushed up on my strength and conditioning. I actually subscribed to the Journal of Strength and Conditioning based on a good friend Tony Battage's recommendation, and was able to sift through and find some really really good research papers on training professional fighters. And what it boiled down to was that during a period where you were really prepping for competition, there was no room for more than one or two maximum heavy lifting sessions in the week, especially if you're doing like exercise specific, sport specific training every day of the week. So, which I was, I was boxing for uh, 5 of 7 days quite intensely, one day not so intensely, and then one day was just like a recovery session where we do ocean swims and a bit of running and things like that. And then 2 out of those 7 days I was sparring, so I had to go to gyms and actually do sort of combat. And so what I ended up doing was I did one day of heavy lifting for max strength, and it was very low rep, always explosive, no slow eccentrics at all. And then I did one day of power, speed and power, and that was mostly around plyometrics and Olympic lifting. And the sessions were quite short, 45 minutes after warm up, and it was never to failure. It was always perfect reps, very fast, very explosive, and generally quite low repetition stuff. So, and that completely changed the game for me. I was able to really increase my performance. I still maintained the physique that I'd sort of built up, and yeah, my boxing was a lot better, and I ended up running into trouble where our coach was very old fashioned and he liked to do a lot of running after a lot of skipping and after a lot of in the ring, like moving about. And I ended up developing the worst case of shin splints that stuck with me for years. And I still now, I just went for a chilled boxing session. The word, I can't think of the word, but it's basically uncompetitive. I'm not training competitively anymore, recreational boxing. And I still wear compression socks when I'm going skipping or running because I still have these shin splints haunt me, which was an overuse injury. Effectively, I just cooked my calves back then. And yeah, that was because we used to have a concrete box basketball court at the PCYC I trained at in Redfern. And we used to do all these up and backs and shuttle runs and sprints and running in there in and around our boxing training. And when you're boxing, you generally warm up and cool down with skipping. And it was just so much of that bouncing and plyometrics. And I just never built the tolerance up, the tissue tolerance. So it was just piss poor load management once again, you know. You know, it is as Phil's saying, it's so important to get this stuff right. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to require sacrifice. You're going to have to let go of something. For me, it was, okay, I can't prioritize physique transformation right now because my sport is more important to me. And when that's over, then I could prioritize my physique training, you know. And for me nowadays, I've spent most of my time prioritizing strength and flexibility balance. And I believe that you can, with the right coaching, bring those together and unify strength and flexibility because they both kind of leverage the same systems in the body, neurological systems in the body. But then when it came time to really want to increase my fitness, my cardiovascular fitness, that became a new element that I really had to manage. And so now, you know, before I wanted to train 6 days a week, strength and flexibility, and develop fitness, I can't do that, you know. So now I've cut it right back to training 2 really hard days, strength and flexibility, and 2 medium intensity days, strength and flexibility. So that's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And then Wednesday, Saturday is cardiovascular, and Sunday is recovery. And I do a little bit of mobility on Sunday, just very gentle, you know. And that's the only way I can do it. And I'm 44 years old. Anything beyond this, I find, is just overload. And it's either overload where I start to become sore and injured, or I just can't work. I turn up to my computer desk here and I'm just like, oh, all I want to do is lay down on the couch and sleep, you know, and
Yeah.
I work from home. So my couch is right there. I can do it at any point.
Yeah, and that's the
So
thing,
it's,
like, you gotta consider, yeah, where you're at in your life, and, professional athletes do insane amounts of training, but then they also do insane amounts of recovery as well, and they don't have those external stresses, and I think it's, people do underestimate just how important recovery is in terms of, like, performance enhancing, like, adaptation and gains to your training. And there's a really nice study done with running showing, like, amateur runners, or like people who basically like barely run, uh, amateur, elite, and professionals, and the amount of total volume that the elite people and the professionals did was pretty much matched. Like, elite runners, you kind of A-type personality, lawyers who get home from work or like get up at 4 a.m. and go for like an intense run. There's only like a certain amount of hours of the day you can be really training, and like you can kind of hit that in like two maximum for most of your sort of middle distance running goals. Like, that's kind of optimal training. So both the elite runners and the professionals will probably be doing the same amount, but it's then the elite runners who have to go and have a high stress job for the rest of the day, or do a physical labor job, or just have to look after the kids the rest of the day. Like, they probably don't have time to eat very well. They don't have time to manage their stress. They're not probably getting to bed early, and so whereas the professional athletes, like when I worked at the Giants AFL club, which is like, if you don't know AFL in Australia, it's the most professional of sports. There's the most funding in it. They're the most professional, like, of athletes that there are in the country. And like, their setup at their was just so sweet. Like, they had, Xboxes and like these beanbags everywhere, and just like this, protein smoothies on tap, and just like this whole setup was just that they could train hard and then hit the ice bars, hit the recovery saunas, and then
and
chill,
recover
and then
hard.
they'd
Yeah.
recover hard. Then they'd get a session in later in the afternoon probably, and then they'd go home. And so, like, that ability to recover hard is just so key to being able to manage high loads. But to kind of working off that idea of like what the professional athletes do is when you think about how you structure your training for this. Sure, there's like what you're doing in the week, and that's really important. But then you kind of zoom out and look like, what are you doing over a year? Because usually with most sports, there's kind of a season for it. So depending on the sport, it might be like a 12-week, soccer, football season. It might be triathlons typically go in Australia from like, November through to March. Like, there's going to be a certain period of time that the it's on, and then there's typically going to be a time where you're going to be in like kind of playoffs or finals, or you'll have a peak race that you really want to do well in if you're doing an endurance sport, or a powerlifting meet that you really want to peak for. So there's typically like these periods of time where you can start to do, like, really periodize your training over a year. And look, like what professional athletes do is in their off season, that's when they really put in the volume of like getting strong, or getting really fit, and they don't do much gameplay at all. But then when it comes to that, might do some skills work, but when it comes to the actual season, that's when they really start to get into skills, and then they just do what they can to maintain their strength, maintain their fitness over the rest of the year, like for their playing period, so that they're really fresh and they can peak in finals. But like it's so important. I think people try and look for this, like, what's the perfect workout for within the week context. But if you look at the UMS, you've got these really nice different phases that you go through, and being able to apply that and utilize like that knowledge, and then apply it to your sort of overall year with when you want to be peaking for your sport. I think that's the key thing to get right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And just know that there's no one size fits all to this, like you really do have to take into consideration lifestyle factors. And I think probably the biggest one is that anything in your lifestyle that is affecting your ability to sleep for 8 to 9 hours uninterrupted through the night is where you should be starting from. Like if you're, and there's a lot of new parents listening, if you're getting uninterrupted, if you're getting interrupted sleep, I should say, then that is a major factor in how hard you can train and push yourself, and expect to get out of your body when you go to the gym, or when you turn up to your home gym, or whatever you've got. And yeah, I think that's something that you really should sort of, I guess, spend a bit of time just analyzing, what other lifestyle factors have I got at play here? What am I doing? When is my, when do I want to peak? When is my peak season? Do you have one? Have you thought that through? Like if you're just turning up to the gym and you want to improve physical performance and how you look and feel, you still should, take a look at your year and figure out, okay, at what point do I want to peak, do my hardest training? At what point am I going to need to take off? Like a lot of people, I think it would serve them well to take into consideration that September, October, November is generally going to be a very, very stressful part of the year. You've got deadlines and work commitments that need to be wrapped up before going into that Christmas period. And that tends to be quite stressful. And a lot of people at the same time of year decide, oh my God, especially in this part of the world, I need to get my beach body in check, and so then they start thinking about going to the gym and ramping up their training in arguably the most stressful period of the year. For me, it's around June, July, because I'm the CFO of our company, and so I end up having to do a lot of additional work getting our accounts in order for that tax period in Australia. We lodge our tax in the middle of the year around the end of June. And so I need to be really realistic around that period of time, that I'm not peaking, and my programming is sort of designed to allow for a little bit of additional downtime around that period. And then again, I like to peak at the end of the year, and then come into that Christmas period being able to take a bit of time off with friends and family, and not regret that and not feel bad about that. So I sort of create 2 macro cycles throughout my year, and I'm not competing in anything anymore. It's just about managing my health. So I really start gently in January, and then ramp up to sort of peak in that May period. And then I back it off through June, and then start to ramp it up again July, August, to peak again in November. And that works really well for me, because you can't, this is important, because you can't train max out all the time. Like you can't be absolutely beating yourself in the gym or in your workouts all year round. It's a recipe for disaster. The only people I've ever known that can do that take an enormous amount of exogenous hormone therapy and things like that to help aid with performance and recovery, and then there's always a back end of that generally they have to deal with later on, so.
Yeah, so just talk big picture there, which I think is, again, one of the most important things. Is like figure out your goals, and then figure out how important each of the factors are. Figure out what you're looking at big picture over a year. But then when it comes to the week, and when you think like within how to structure a week around it, I think that obviously the type of sport matters, because the body parts involved where you're going to be stressing, and then the energy systems that you're going to be stressing, and then the muscle fiber types that are going to be needed. So if you think about body areas, that's going to be, is it a lower body dominant sport? Is it upper body dominant? Then is it like the energy systems? Is it a high intensity sprinting, like sprint recover sort of activity? Do you need to be powerful? Do you need to be quick and agile? Do you need to be strong? And then when you like cardiovascularly, is that going to be high intensity efforts, or is it going to be like long, slow endurance? So if you're competing in triathlons, for example, then you're never going to be at sprint speed, but you're going to be at like maintaining for hours. Yeah, and then uh, so the muscle fiber types as well. So like if you're doing your type 2X, type 2 fibers that are really involved in strength and power versus your type 1s, which are going to be more in that endurance. So when thinking about the energy system, so aerobic versus anaerobic, and then muscle fiber types, and then area of the body, that gives us some context to then look at, okay, how do we make sure that those energy systems are recovered by the time that you need to use them to your maximal. So I guess if we work off the assumption that the sport is being played on a Saturday, for example, and then we look at how the UMS flows throughout a week, it's typically like Tuesday is squat, right, and then Friday is deadlift.
That's right.
And I'm
Yeah.
going to assume it's going to be like a game of the world sport. Let's say it's football, it's soccer.
Yeah, but like at the base level, we have so many different versions of the program split, and of course
Yeah.
when we onboard someone, they go through a pre-exercise questionnaire, and that's the very first thing we figure out. What time constraints do they have? What equipment constraints or limitations do they have? What do they have access to? Are they training in a gym? Are they training at home? And then we figure out a formula or a template that's going to work best for them. And then it's a constant back and forth. Is this working? How is it going?
Yeah.
To gauge what obstacles or hurdles they're overcoming. But I use the basic framework, which is yes, Monday is vertical push pull, Tuesday is squat and hamstring and calf, and then Wednesday I don't do athletic development or the calisthenics anymore. I'm back doing my boxing. And then Thursday is horizontal push pull, and Friday is hip bend or deadlift, which is
External
pretty
rotation.
much external rotation. And then on Saturday I'm doing boxing again. So yeah, that framework works for me, but it totally depends on the
Yeah.
individual
So
and what their needs and goals are.
if we're doing this kind of hypothetical of a person playing soccer on a Saturday and slash football, the world game, then the way I'd kind of think about it is
Go the
like,
Socceroos last night, dominated 5-0.
oh really? Who
Yeah.
against?
It was the second game against oh my god. Leb who was it? Was it Lebanon?
Too
I think
busy
so. Yeah.
scoring goals to even see who
It was Lebanon. Yeah, it
Lebanon.
was. It was.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
well done, Socceroos. So I guess the way I'd be thinking about it is if I was
I watched the game with my son, by the way, and I still couldn't remember. I'm quite tired. I've just boxed.
yeah. So with like soccer, I'd probably be doing like a bit more sort of running cardio throughout the week as well. So what I'd probably do is do like a one lower body day and make that really big and go in for it earlier in the week. Then I'd probably have like one day where I was doing a sort of steady state cardio with maybe some like surges and sprints at the end. And then I'd probably have like a more of an upper body focus. So you're doing two really good upper body days throughout there. So what my week would probably look like if I was doing that would be like keep the Monday as the vertical push pull. So you have two nice recovery days from your soccer game. I'd go a kind of mega lower body day on the Tuesday where I'd even go like alternating week by week of like 1 week squat, 1 week deadlift, potentially like focus where you'd have like the primaries as squat and then the secondaries as deadlift and kind of go back and forth on that with some external rotation and single leg stuff. Sorry, some abductor and external rotation and adductor work and single leg. So it's like a big lower body day. And then I'd go, Thursday as Thursday or Friday as the upper body day potentially in there, and maybe even like a kind of single leg stability strength, like lighter strength day on like the Thursday and make it low volume. So that's one way of doing it. Obviously, that's not the only way of doing it, but that's a way that I'd still be like incorporating all the kind of most important fundamental movements that the UMS covers while just giving myself plenty of time to be fresh and recovered for the Saturday.
Yeah, look, when I used to play football, and it was a few years back, but I found it really challenging because the lower body days, I had training Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then game day on Saturday, and it, it was almost impossible to fit a big squat session in during that period of time without it really affecting my ability to train on
Yeah, true. Because then you've got the training as
Tuesday,
well during the
Thursday.
week. So if you got
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
And what it really came down is, and it was really funny because my team used to always say, "Why are you so fast on game day and so slow at training?" You know, and it was because I was still doing my squat and deadlift days and trying to fit them in. And I just knew that when I went to training, I'd just perform like absolute crap. But I wasn't taking my football really, really seriously. You know, I certainly wasn't playing professionally. If I was to do it all again, I would probably, yeah, during the season, I may even not do lower body training because it's
Actually,
just
yeah, let
so
me revise my
demanding.
answer. Probably what I'd think there is like the most fatiguing thing that causes the most like I guess structural stress and damage of the muscles that then responds in like muscular hypertrophy and strength development is volume. Like of all the different, obviously when you go to really high peaks of like the resistance slash weight on the bar, like that, there's going to be a level where that's going to be really hard. But if you've ever like done a very short sprint session or you've done a heavy like not quite maximal test, but like close to, and you've done really low volume but high intensity, it's often quite an invigorating feeling, and you don't often pull up too sore from it if you've got training experience. You've been doing that kind of lift for a while, and you've been at least done sort of like 5x5 training, which I know a lot of the people in the challenge are doing at the moment. So that would probably be how I look at it: is doing like a if you're doing your lower body, just keep the volume super low, like just working up to maybe one max set even, because like when you're in season, you're not, as we said, like if you're doing training as well, you're not going to be able to like recover enough to perform well at training and then to perform well in game day. So if you can manage your volume in your lower body, but kind of hit decent intensity so you can maintain your strength, then that's the way I'd go about it, because there's really good research showing, and I've talked about this so many times, but like, even doing 1/9 of the strength that gains strength is enough to maintain it if given adequate intensity. And the study on that was looking at basically like one set of one exercise once a week is generally enough. So I'd probably
That's
just,
what I
yeah,
was about to
yeah,
sort of suggest. You know, during that season, just go for maintenance. Like, just accept that you're not going to be able to, increase your squat strength without having major impact on your football. So just go for maintenance and do it not to failure, and just and man, it's a good time to just get those guns. Like,
yeah,
because you don't need them on the football field much, and that's something that you can. There's always stuff that you can challenge and develop, and you just got to pick your moments, and then during off season, that's when it's like leg day all day.
yeah. And because you've maintained through that whole time, like you'll be in such a better place than if you just completely, like deleted uh, strength training or kept it so light that you weren't actually getting any of that
Yep.
positive sort of strength stimulus. And the nice thing about low volume, high intensity training is like it does prime you for powerful movements, which when it comes to like sprinting on a field, then being able to produce maximal force is really important. So
Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah,
anyone playing football out there, you should be really promoting really strong hamstring and adductor strength, because that they tend to
yeah,
be areas of the body that really are susceptible to pretty bad
yeah,
injury. And there is a direct correlation between hamstring and ACL problems in football. Sorry, hamstring strength, adductor strength, and ACL issues and injuries. So just make sure that you're doing those Nordics and Romanian deadlifts and hamstring
yeah.
curls and maintaining that
And
strength.
then yeah, and then that single leg work to keep the really good balance with
Yeah.
utilizing your abductors for your top down sort of stability, your ankle strength, and from your bottom up. So I guess what that might practically look at, like in a workout now, might be on that Tuesday, is like working up to doing a kind of heavy, like one heavy max set that probably is still like do you guys don't really use like reps and reserve in the program? I've noticed so much. Like it's generally more talk about like rate of perceived exertion,
Yeah.
RPE, but like reps and reserve is basically like how many reps do you have left in the tank before you lose like perfect form. And so that's why I'd kind of think about it, is like I'd want to do a heavy set where I've got like at least two reps in reserve, but it's like heavy enough that you have to take the weight really seriously and then leave it there. So I'd like work up to a heavy squat and then maybe work up to a heavy deadlift, and then I'd do a heap of single leg, all the great stuff that you guys have in all your supplementary exercises for your
Yeah.
lower body, making sure to bring in some hamstring, adductor, and abductor as well.
Yep. Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. And look, I've trained semi-professional football players, semi-professional basketball players, and they both said that when we developed more upper body strength, it really, really helped them on the
Oh yeah.
field or on the court, because there are moments of tussle. There are moments where you need to exert your physical dominance over your opposition, and having good, strong upper body is going to help that a lot. It certainly is something that you can have a bit more focus on, and it's not going to have a major effect on your like anyone who's trained for bodybuilding, you always notice the DOMs of your lower body more than your upper body, and that's purely because you tend to use them more in everyday life, and that's the same when you're playing a sport. So if you absolutely belt your upper body, it doesn't, I mean, of course you're sore and you feel it, but it's not nowhere near when you really batter yourself on leg day. So yeah, I still think that you can make gains in other areas. It's just yeah, picking your moments and making sure that you're building it around what you said earlier. What is your priority? And have a priority. Don't try and have 10 priority. Don't bastardize priority. You can't have priorities. You have one priority, and then build everything else around that.
Yeah, so I think like having that priority, but then knowing like what can I do for maintenance for the other levels, so that when I come back and change my priority of adaptation thereafter, that I can like start much in a much better place. Because I think that's what you guys do so beautifully is incorporate a level of everything, so your floor is raised from nothing to something.
Yep.
But then I think that like because that's a trap that so many people fall into, and I've done plenty of times when I've gone down the rabbit hole of just powerlifting or just endurance exercise. It's so tempting to just ignore everything else, but yeah, have that one priority that you're going towards, and then just make sure your floor is more than zero, and ideally maintaining all the benefits you've had from training hard in that area in the past.
Absolutely. And if you don't have a sport, if you're not playing football, if you're not boxing, if you're not playing ultimate frisbee like Phil was, or doing triathlons, then consider, finding calisthenics, which is what we encourage in the UMS, because it's a great way to demonstrate your strength and flexibility, and benchmark yourself. And it's fun. It's fun unlocking new movement skills that go beyond just lifting weight or stretching in the gym. And I really like that. I really like seeing people start to unlock sort of calisthenics movements, and just the joy in that. It is
Yeah.
quite fun, and it is nice to be able to demonstrate the skill attributes that you're developing in your workouts in something, and it doesn't need to be a team sport, or a combat sport, or something like that.
Yeah, it's one of the core tenets of my like framework around consistency is like if you can make it enjoyable, which usually the easiest way to do that is to make it social. If you can make it like have celebrations of your body in the process where your training is being used to be able to do something and to be able to celebrate what your body can do. So for that could be sports, and I love the idea of calisthenics. That I remember when I did some gymnastics for a while, like just that a bit like to see what my body could do was like just such an unreal experience and so different from my team sports past experience. But it might be an active holiday or something that you're working towards. Having that celebration of your body, and then having accountability and support. They're my big three for consistency. If you can
Yeah.
build those in, then it's likely that you'll be in it for the long run and love it.
Good stuff. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed that discussion. We sort of went all over the place there, but we did give some good
Yeah, I think
insights. And
yeah, hopefully just like and yeah, just to recap, like pick your goals, zoom out, then zoom in, and then just think about those goals again so you don't fall into that trap of doing everything
yeah,
and getting nowhere.
absolutely, absolutely, and take your age and other lifestyle factors into consideration when you're doing that.
Yeah.
Don't try to be a hero if you've got a baby that's waking you up all through the
Yeah.
night, and then you're trying to turn up to the gym at 5 or 6 a.m. and absolutely get the maximum 110% effort out. It's just
Yeah.
not going to work. Good
Yeah.
stuff, guys. We'll catch you
Love it.
next week.
Yeah,
Take
keep
care.
asking questions. We love them.
Yeah, absolutely.